Okay, so picture a country that's smaller than Rhode Island. It's kind of quiet, a little rainy, and pretty much everyone around you is, statistically, the wealthiest group of people on the entire planet. Now, you're probably thinking Dubai or Monaco, right? Nope, this is the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, a nation that, honestly, operates less like a country and more like a massive hedge fund that just happens to have its own flag. So how on earth did this tiny nation become the world's wealthiest? Let's get into it.
Right, let's just start with the numbers, because they are pretty staggering. When we're talking about GDP per capita, that's a measure of a country's wealth per person. Luxembourg isn't just winning, it is absolutely lapping the competition. We're talking over $135,000 per person. To put that in perspective, the US is sitting around $80,000 and the UK is way back at $50,000. I mean, it's just an astronomical figure. But what does that actually feel like for the people living there?
Well, on the surface, it looks like an absolute paradise. The legal minimum wage for a skilled worker is nearly $3,000 a month. Sounds incredible, doesn't it? But here is the massive catch. It's a classic case of what they call golden handcuffs. That incredible salary, it gets completely eaten alive by the cost of living. A simple one-bedroom apartment can easily set you back $2,500 a month. So you're earning a fortune, but you feel like you're constantly broke.
So how does an economy like this even work? Well, the whole secret is really in this one number, 220,000. That's the number of people who make up nearly half of the country's entire workforce. They're called the frontaliers, and they are literally an army of commuters who cross the border every single day from France, Germany, and Belgium. They come in, earn those huge Luxembourgish salaries, and then they go home at night because they could never afford to actually live there. To really understand how this bizarre economic model even came to be, we've got to go back in time. Long before all the shiny glass office buildings, Luxembourg was mostly known for, well, mud, rocks, and being constantly invaded. It was a poor agricultural backwater. Everything changed back in the 1840s when they discovered iron ore. Fast forward to the 20th century, and boom, Luxembourg is a global steel titan. Its main company, Arbed, built the skyscrapers of New York City. But then, in the 1970s, the global steel market completely imploded. The Rust Belt apocalypse hit Europe hard. And this right here is where Luxembourg made its most defining move.
You see, while other countries were panicking, trying to bail out their dying industries, Luxembourg did something much colder, much more calculated. They looked at their cooling blast furnaces and essentially said, okay, we don't make metal anymore, we make money. Just like that, they abandoned their entire industrial heritage, basically overnight, and decided to completely reinvent themselves from the ground up. And boy, did they reinvent themselves. They pivoted, and they pivoted hard, straight into finance. The government started passing laws to create this incredibly stable, super discreet, and extremely low tax environment to attract foreign banks and all that corporate cash. And the result? Today, you've got roughly 125 banks in a country of just 660,000 people. Think about that. That's one bank for every 5,000 residents. It's an absolutely astonishing concentration of financial power.
So we know the big pivot was to finance. But, you know, banking is kind of a polite word for what really made the country so filthy rich. Let's crack open the vault and take a look at the engine room of this great tax machine.
If you're asking an official from Luxembourg if their country is a tax haven, they will get very offended. And they'll give you this very official line about being a jurisdiction of tax competitiveness. But back in 2014, a massive scandal known as LuxLeaks blew that denial to pieces. It revealed the reality. For decades, Luxembourg's been operating as one of the world's most sophisticated and successful tax havens.
And the mechanism itself is actually brilliantly simple. It's a process they call optimization. So here's how it works. A giant corporation, let's say Amazon, makes billions in sales all across Europe. But instead of paying taxes in Germany or France where they made the money, it funnels all that revenue through a tiny little office in Luxembourg. In return, the Luxembourg government gives them a secret sweetheart deal, which results in an effective tax rate of often less than 1%.
And if you want a perfect illustration of the sheer audacity of this system, look no further than this. The man who was Prime Minister of Luxembourg for almost 20 years, the chief architect of this entire tax model, was a guy named Jean-Claude Juncker. And what was his next job? Oh, just President of the European Commission, the very organization in charge of policing tax avoidance across Europe. I mean, you literally can't make this stuff up.
Now, this system has generated an unimaginable amount of wealth for the state, but for the people who actually have to live there, it's created this bizarre and deeply stressful reality. This is what life is like inside the golden cage.
Okay, the most immediate problem is a housing crisis from hell. Land is incredibly scarce, and it's hoarded by just a few powerful families, so prices have just exploded. The basic human need for shelter has become an insane luxury good. The average price for a normal, standalone family house is now well over 1 million euros.
Let's make this real for a second. Let's take someone we'll call Sarah. As a teacher in Luxembourg, she earns 90,000 euros a year. That salary puts her in the top 1% of earners globally, and yet she lives in a tiny 40-square-meter studio apartment and has absolutely zero hope of ever being able to afford to buy her own home. This isn't a rare story. It's the reality for thousands of high-earning professionals there.
So the government knows this is a massive problem. I mean, if people can't afford to live there, the whole economic model just falls apart. So to keep a super stressed out population from freaking out, they've started this radical and kind of weird experiment.
On February 29, 2020, Luxembourg became the first country in the entire world to make all public transport completely free. All of it. You just get on. No ticket, no pass, nothing. Now, part of it is to ease traffic, sure, but really it's basically a bribe. It's a way of saying, hey, sorry your landlord is taking all your money, but look, the bus ride to your ridiculously overpriced apartment is on us.
But here's the thing about Luxembourg. They are always thinking 5 steps ahead. They know the international pressure is mounting on their tax practices, so the country is already getting ready for its next great pivot. And this one sounds like it's straight out of science fiction.
Back in 2017, they passed something called the Space Resources Law. What this law does is say that if a private company based in Luxembourg flies to an asteroid and mines it for minerals, those minerals legally belong to the company. This is a direct challenge to the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, which pretty clearly forbids nations from owning celestial bodies. And here is the genius legal loophole they are using to justify the whole thing. They argue that we aren't claiming the asteroid itself, we're just keeping the rocks we found on it. It's a clever, kind of ruthless argument, and they're pouring millions into becoming the Silicon Valley of space mining. They're betting that a single asteroid could contain trillions with a T of dollars in precious metals.
And that right there is the story of Luxembourg in a nutshell. It's this relentless, pragmatic drive to survive and thrive by constantly reinventing its entire reason for being, moving from the ground to the bank vault, and now to the stars.
So, we're left with this series of just unbelievable contradictions. You've got the world's wealthiest population, full of people who can't even afford to buy a house. You've got an economy powered by a workforce that literally disappears every single evening. A government that makes transportation free, while shelter becomes an impossible luxury. And now, a nation that's betting its entire future on mining asteroids. It's wild. It all leads you to this one final, really provocative question. When a nation's identity is so completely tied to its balance sheet, when all of its policies are designed for maximum profit, and its own population is treated more like a highly paid but temporary workforce, what is it really? It's the ultimate experiment in modern capitalism, and it leaves you wondering if Luxembourg is still a country at all, or if it has simply become the world's most successful corporation.